Welcome, everybody, to the 7 Minutes to Better Selling podcast. So, Marty, before we turn it over to you for a question, the sales industry and maybe even more specifically, the financial services sales industry is under a good deal of pressure as of late. Like, it's harder to get people face to face, in this virtual or hybrid world that so many of us live.
Cool. Well, thanks again for having me, Colin. I'm really happy to be with you and your guests. My story is short, but I'll be brief. I started off as kind of a geek electrical engineer at WPI in Worcester, just about 40 miles west of Boston. Then joined GE's training program and had various assignments around the country at GE's facilities. And then went back to business school, where you're from, in Philadelphia at Penn. And did my business school work at the Wharton School, and then joined Accenture. I had been a client of Accenture when I was at GE before I started school, and I really liked the culture and Accenture. I was there for 25 years. I was a partner for 17, and my last assignment there was I ran our book of business for all of our life science clients, which are pharma, biopharma, medical products in the New England area. So I had a large book of business, or a fairly sized book of business, one that I was proud to have. And I finished there a few years ago. And then, as you mentioned in one of your intro notes, I've sort of turned the corner to giving back, going full circle back to WPI, and teaching at their business school to help round out the really technical edges that those engineers have to get them ready for the business world.
It's great. One of the fun things is in this world of like technology sales, which is getting so popular, there's so many like engineers who are learning to or working to bridge the gap between like the technical component of the world and relaying that to the sales component of the world. And so that's fun to see. Do you spend much time on that, Marty, in your learnings at WPI?
That is the objective. These students, these undergraduate students, have all the tech skills that you would ever hope for them to have, and the analytical thinking that goes with it, but they don't yet have the experience or the academia background to round off those edges and see how to apply that technology in a business world, which of course always includes sales and is led by sales. So that it is that exact objective that I'm trying to do with my kids at school. So I love doing it.
Yeah, it's great. Marty, let me ask you this. So you come from the world of like pure consulting or true consulting. And why I call it that is salespeople, in particular over the last 10 years, have tried to evolve into this idea of consultative selling. And so like my question to you, and see if you can maybe lead the conversation on how to help people understand like what consultative consulting work is and how that translates into consultative selling.
Yeah, I think the concept of consulting conjures the image of the consultant giving advice and new knowledge to their client, when it really in practice is almost the opposite, where the number one consultative selling skill that I ever had was listening. And as a result of listening, active listening, and getting to really understand what the client's problem was and what the environment around which that problem existed in their business place, it was only then that I could ever craft a good consultative solution to them.
Let me ask you this. I would suggest, and maybe others would suggest as a generalization, salespeople aren't the best listeners.
Right.
In other words, are good talkers. Yeah. So how do you become a better listener, or how did you become a better listener specifically?
Well, I want to talk before you're done speaking is a disease that consultants have in spades, and I just found that left the client less interested in what you were saying, and ready to move on to the next person or their own topic. And the more I listened deeply to what they were saying, the more they had to say to me, and the more I could learn exactly what was going on, not at the surface, but because I embedded myself in their company every day, came into their office and tried to make their lives a little better, picking up pieces that maybe they weren't doing, and generally advancing their cause at the maybe sometimes extent of my own, was the oil that made the sales engine, spin.
Man, I hope everyone picked up that very last sentence that Marty said. Like, even if it was at the expense of my business or my success or my ability to tell my story, I was willing to hang in and listen all the way through. Yeah, that was a great one, Marty. How do you, I'm going to use air quotes here, fake listen? Like, some people say, I don't have great listening skills. So like, how do I work on this? Like, how do I get to fake it till I make it type thing? Like, is there things you can do to train yourself to ultimately be a better listener? Like, we can't, if we're not a great listener, we can't all of a sudden say, okay, now we're going to do this, we're going to be a great listener. What are those early steps that get us to be a great one?
Well, if you struggle with that skill, I think you have to consciously put your agenda on the back burner. You have to go into the discussion saying, I know I'm trying to make a sale here, but what does the other person really want to get out of this discussion? And how can I enable that? Because the more times those discussions make a success for what that speaker, your client, wants, as opposed to what you want, the more times the trust starts generating and building and building and building. You have to try to consciously put your agenda on the table behind you and figure out what the agenda of the other person is and work on that.
Yeah, I love that vision, that visual. Like, take what I have in my mind, put it back there, and then we'll worry about that if we get this first thing done. Marty, I'm going to ask you for a single thought, a wrap-up thought, if you will, and then we'll wrap up the call after that.
Well, I go back when I think about my sales efforts. It is about the trust, because if you're coming to a conversation with a client that doesn't trust you, you're just not really going to make it work. You have to do the day-to-day work, put in the hours, put in the effort, pick up the pieces that they leave behind to day after day generate and build upon the trust of the prior success.
Developing the Next Leaders continues to stay focused on helping sales folks throughout the world. So how we do that isn't always easy, but it all starts with, as Marty shared with us, listening more thoroughly and more often. Good selling, everyone.